You. You're the person the world needs. Life is changing, and the future is uncertain. You may not know how or why yet, but you know you're here to make a difference. You're not waiting for the universe to give you the answers. You're finding them for yourself. Challenging echoes with evidence. Few people have great ideas. Even fewer make them happen. It takes a dreamer, an explorer, a researcher, a leader, a thinker. It takes someone like you.
Hello and welcome to our LinkedIn Live broadcast, 5 top tips for recharging your career. My name's Chris Lewis. I'm the Head of Future Student Recruitment here at the University of New South Wales, which means I get the absolute privilege to take you through a really exciting panel of guest speakers this evening. We're going to really explore what it means to recharge your career. It's an interesting time in the world, and we think that this is the exact sort of advice that our prospective students are looking for. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge the Bedegal people, the traditional custodians of the land on which UNSW is located, and acknowledge elders both past, present, and emerging. We're very excited to be able to deliver this event this evening together with LinkedIn. It's a very exciting friendship that we have, and our first speaker will take you through some really interesting tips to make the most of your LinkedIn profile. I'll be joined by John Wenborn very shortly. We've got 3 exciting speakers in total tonight. In addition to John, we'll also be joined by Blair Slater and Tracy Wilcox, 2 of our very interesting faculty members here at the University of New South Wales. And at the end, we'll be joined by all of our panellists on stage and take questions from you. So that gives you the opportunity to engage with us in real time this evening via the LinkedIn platform and really help us to explore the questions that are the most relevant to you. It's an interesting point in the world. We're starting to see a little bit of an economic bounce back, particularly here in Australia, and we're seeing the rates of unemployment start to decrease, which means there's lots and lots of people out there exploring what it means to be employable. And certainly as a university, it's really important to us that our graduates do go out and represent UNSW to the best of their ability and be amongst the most employable graduates out there in Australia and indeed the world. It's really important to think about what you bring to the table. And we're excited to deliver this in partnership with LinkedIn because really that approach to employability that we're going to explore tonight is about more than what we do and about more than what you do. It's something that we need to do together. And there's no silver bullet answer tonight, but hopefully at the end of about an hour, we're going to leave you with a bit of an educated approach to the tools and your own personal approach to study that you will be able to feel nice and prepared for the challenges of job seeking in 2021 and beyond. As I said earlier, I'll be joined by 3 very interesting guests, the first of which will be John Wenborn, as Senior Account Director at LinkedIn. He's going to explore 5 professional tips for a really professional profile. Then I'll be joined by Blair Slater, our Head of Student Career Ready Connections here at the University of New South Wales. He's going to explore 5 ways that postgraduate study can really help to propel you forwards. And last but certainly not least, I'll be joined by Associate Professor Tracy Wilcox, our Academic Director of Postgraduate Programs here at the UNSW Business School. We're going to talk about some of those really in-demand skills for the rapidly developing workforce that we know that you're all really interested in. As I said earlier, you can put your questions, in fact, into the chat underneath this video. And at the end, I'll be joined by all of our panelists, and we'll explore some of those really, really interesting questions that I'm sure you're keen for our panel to explore on your behalf. So without any further ado, it's a pleasure to welcome John Wenborn here this evening from LinkedIn. We're going to have a little bit of a discussion now about using the platform to its absolute maximum to your benefit. So John, thank you. Welcome. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Look, just for our audience's benefit, tell us a little bit about yourself, or they can go look you up on LinkedIn.
They can, yeah. So I have been working in technology with education for about 15 years now. I'm showing my age. And in that time, one of the things that I've really become passionate about has been companies that are changing the way we do things. So we used to do something one way, and now with new technology, we can do it a much better way. And giving people opportunity, organisations and people, the opportunity to excel with using that technology.
And it's interesting because when we think about LinkedIn, we think about job seeking and a modern approach to the CV. How would you summarise LinkedIn as an employee?
Yeah, so LinkedIn it started like that, but it's more than that now. LinkedIn is really a data company. We're the largest professional network in the world. We've got over 700 million people on there. With all of those data points, if you think about, we know where people work, we know what universities they've been to, we know what skills they've got. We also know where there's skills gaps, we know where there's jobs gaps. We have all of this data, and what we're trying to do is, this is our mission, is to give everyone that information so that they can go and find the perfect job for them. But not only that, organisations can go and find the right talent to succeed as well.
So it's almost a connection service to help people connect those dots.
Absolutely, and one of the other things as far as using LinkedIn for yourself is we're trying to connect all the professionals in the world, and we all know that a collective of ideas is better than one person. So if you think about, you get 10 doctors in a room to solve a problem, or you get one, you're going to get a much better answer. So what we're trying to do is connect all the industries together so that they can all comment, discuss problems or great things that they've got on their mind, and really elevate that industry.
And it's a really interesting thought. I mean, you said there the 700 million members worldwide. I guess that leads to the question, how do you stand out in that sort of environment? And I guess that's a big question, and it's a job-seeking sort of question that I'll probably ask every panellist tonight. But tell us a little bit, I imagine you've seen a lot of LinkedIn profiles. Yeah,
absolutely. So gone are the days where you go to LinkedIn and you just put your photo in there and you have a title and you go, right, my LinkedIn profile's done. What we talk about now is about having a brand on LinkedIn, and it's really about standing out. And it's not about being better than the profile next to you, it's about being authentic and being you. So everyone in the world has something that's special about them. That's what LinkedIn is trying to do. It's trying to pull that out and give you the opportunity to advertise that. And when I say advertise, we mean it. We're talking about your brand. It's a commercial for you in a professional sense.
And I think that's a really interesting juxtaposition, if you like, because people don't necessarily relate authenticity with advertising.
Absolutely.
Although there is great truth in really great advertising. So what does it mean to be authentic on the platform?
Yeah, and I think that you're right in what you're saying. Advertising in the past has maybe been seen as a bit tricky or whatever. I think the world is changing, and being authentic, whether it be from commercials you see on TV, right through to people on LinkedIn, it's all about actually being relatable to other people and going, this is who I really am, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing, and then your brand being what you actually are, not what you're pretending to be.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the really interesting points of a platform like this is it's quite hard to get that across on the traditional CV, the traditional piece of paper. So where does LinkedIn fit in that sort of, because you've still got to submit a CV when you apply for a job, right?
Absolutely, and CVs are very important because they list what you've done, who you are, where you live, what your address is, how to contact you. What LinkedIn's giving you the opportunity to do is go beyond that. So what I mean by that is connecting with certain types of people that are within your industry, then sharing ideas. That's one way to elevate what you're doing through LinkedIn. Another way is on LinkedIn, you can have videos on there. You can put, you could share stories that are important to you. You can post on there your ideas. We'll talk a little bit about posting, but one of the things about posting and putting a video on there, for example, is that all of a sudden, it's not just a CV. Someone sees what you've put up there, they click on it, and they get a full picture of who you are in well, hopefully under 30 seconds. We don't think you'd post for much longer than that on a video.
Okay, that's really interesting, because I think this idea of that data sort of platform, going back to that, data is only as smart as the inputs into it, right? So
exactly
you're
right.
talking a little bit about that authenticity of the input and how the algorithm sort of starts to understand you.
It does. Yes, and so I'll go back a little bit so
Yeah.
that I can fit. Yeah, so I see. The thing about LinkedIn is that what we're trying to do there is we use AI, and it's great. I got to use that in a sentence today. In technology, it's always a good thing. What we do is we use AI. So if you've just got what you do on LinkedIn, then the AI will go, that person has studied this, they've done that job, and they're this old, and they're blah, blah, blah. What we're trying to do is get the job that will suit you better. So if there's 10 jobs that need your skill set, a couple of them will actually suit you as a person. And that's what LinkedIn can do. Because if you're authentic on LinkedIn, our AI will pick up what you like, what you're sharing, some of the posts that you put on there, and actually connect you with opportunity that suits who you are, not necessarily just your credentials.
Because that credentialism is a really interesting point, isn't it?
Yeah.
And we're talking a little bit about postgraduate study and the opportunities available at UNSW, but that's just one part of that employability picture, and we'll explore that a little with some of our other speakers. But tell me then about how to use that credential to advantage on the platform, because if a student comes and does a master's program and then they put it on their LinkedIn, you know, that's maybe ticking a box, but it's not using it to its maximum potential.
Yeah. And we see that as the most important part. You need to have your credentials. That gives you a seat at the table, obviously. But once you're at the table, there's 100 of you. How can you differentiate yourself? It's a great question. So on LinkedIn, you can put a lot of media on there. You can put a lot of so for example, if you're doing a course, for example, you could put on there a video of you in a group working together and coming up with a solution, and then with the results on there with some music. All of a sudden, you're not just the person that did that course, you're the person that did that and is working really well in a group and is really excited about what they do. You've just elevated yourself from just a CV. I work with a lot of recruiters and with a lot of companies, from private to education through to government. And one of the things they do is they get a lot of people applying for their jobs. If you've got 100 people there, 10 of them only have CVs, the next 90 do have a LinkedIn profile, and let's just say the next 50 of those profiles are just photo, name, what they do. And then you've got a couple of them at the end there that have a video, what they've done, previous jobs, even if it's got nothing to do with what you've done before. This all adds to who you are. All of a sudden, you get put at the top of the list because you've attracted them. And we said this at the start, your advertising, for lack of a better word, has worked.
And because I think that people use advertising when they use it effectively to assess fit, right? So, you know, you can't understand my personal brand from my CV necessarily.
Not really, no.
But as an employer, how are they using that? They're using LinkedIn to assess that sort of...
Absolutely. So out of all the employers that I've spoken to, now, more so than ever, they all go to LinkedIn because they're trying to get a picture. They're going to Google that person and they're going to go to LinkedIn, and they're trying to get more than just what's on their CV. We also find that...
Is it harder to exaggerate on LinkedIn as well?
It is. That's a good question. Thank you for asking that one, actually.
That's a little dig at the traditional CV, I guess.
Yeah, it is, because people see it. It's peer judged. If that's
it's public.
Yeah, absolutely. So if I go on there and say I'm the CEO of LinkedIn, it won't take more than an hour before I'm getting a lot of comments going, "Who do you think you are?" So it is that whole theory of, if you're in a room with 10 people, you act a certain way. If you're on your own, you can say whatever you want. So,
And it's really fascinating when we talk about it as a public platform, and you know, there's not been something where you could go and benchmark yourself against your competitors. If you think about applying for a job as there's a level of competition there.
Yeah.
Now you can start to see what your peers are, how they're representing themselves, and use that to your advantage as well. Know your competitor.
Absolutely. You can do all sorts of things like that. You can really use it as data for yourself as well. You think about knowing your competitor, you can go and see what they're doing, what they're looking for, but you can also go and look at someone that's working there and go, I want to be like that person. Look through their LinkedIn profile, and they literally spells out the steps of what you need to do to get to that, whether it be skills or whatever it is.
Yeah, look, and we see that. I had a colleague of mine recently say to me she was stalking my LinkedIn because she was trying to work out how I got my job. And I sort of said, well, it was an accident, but, it doesn't show that on LinkedIn necessarily, but there's this wonderful aspirational piece to it as well. And it gives you that opportunity to really cultivate it. You were sort of saying earlier that the algorithm picks up what you're interested in. And
absolutely.
So how should people use that platform then to their own advantage?
There's so many different ways, but one that just came to mind there, this, what you said, stalking. So we call that
stalking. It's a strong word, isn't it?
No, and we use it. We call it professional stalking.
Yeah.
So stalk everyone. You're going into a meeting, stalk everyone in that meeting. You're going into an interview, stalk everyone there. You see a company that you might want to work for or that you might want to connect with, stalk everyone in there, see what they're doing, see what they're interested in, see if that culture fits you. And then all of a sudden what we're doing is we're really starting to bring organisations and people together that suit each other.
And it's such a missed opportunity if people don't. I've interviewed people before, and you can tell when somebody's done their research on you as the person doing the interview. You can tell when somebody is seeking to align their values with your own and being authentic in that. And you can tell when people have no idea of the background that you bring to the table as well. So it's a two-way relationship, really, when it's done well.
I mean, to be fair, I stalked everyone before I came here today.
Look, likewise, John.
And I found some articles that were interesting, actually, one about cricket, but we were talking about that before. Yeah.
Absolutely. Look, I think it's a really interesting piece, and that. So, I mean, you touch on cricket. Where's the line now between professional interest and personal interest on a platform like this? Because you do see people sharing, things that they care about in a more personal sort of context.
It is personal. There still is a line, by the way. So, what we see, really, LinkedIn, you can use it however you want, but what we see, there is still a line. On LinkedIn, you think about when you walk into the office or whatever job or education institution you go to, how do you want to be perceived in your professional career? And that's how you would react on LinkedIn. It's the things that you write about, it's the things that you share, it's the posts that you put up. Now, on the flip side, there's other social media companies that you can go on there and tell everyone about the new dog that you bought, for example. If you do that on LinkedIn, your credibility won't be as high because people are expecting to hear about your expertise. So it's nearly self-governing, to be honest. I always say the best way to look at it is I dress all my comments and everything the way I dress for work. It's a bit smarter. I'm not like in thongs and shorts, like I would be on Facebook, for example.
Yep. So it's best to leave the comedy dance routines to TikTok.
100%.
Unless you're going into a comedy dance troupe professionally.
That's exactly right. And yes, bring your personal side out. But that doesn't mean, like I said, what COVID puppy you just bought and whatever it may be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, what about then, if we take it as a living, breathing piece of data, there's got to be opportunity to optimize that, right? Like it shouldn't be a static thing.
No, absolutely. And I call it the Christmas cull, but every year at Christmas, for example, your network's very important. And I won't talk too much about networks because other people are going to talk about them today. But it's very important to connect with the right people on LinkedIn because they share information that's important to you, right? So at the end of the year, I always get there and I look at people that I've connected with that really have not helped my LinkedIn profile at all and no information's come from them. So I just, don't worry, they don't get a message saying they've been dropped. I just get rid of that because I try and keep my network within my industry and the things that I want to know about. Can I please go into as well, if you follow the right companies, network with the right people and follow the right people that you admire, you aggregate news and information that is about your career. And when you know more about your career, you can go into a meeting that day and know all the latest things that have happened in, for me, tech, universities, and my colleagues and the people I'm connected with.
Yeah, it's a morning briefing.
It absolutely is. But if you don't have the right networks and you're not following the right people or the right organisations, then you're going to get that noise. And we get enough noise through all the other mediums as it is. So aggregate that and be very choosy about who you connect and who you and what companies you follow.
John, it's been fascinating. We've promised our audience 5 top tips.
Yep.
So if you had to summarise into, this is the hard part, if you had to summarise into 5 of your sort of top tips.
Yep. So one of them is talk about what is important to you because that really brings out your authentic self. And at LinkedIn, we talk about authentic self a lot. The other one is on your profile, it makes such a difference if you just dress it up with videos, banners. If you look at a profile that has nothing on it, and then you look at another profile with videos and banners, and you filled in all the bits to make it attractive, people will go towards your profile, even if it's got less information on it. And that's pretty much about it, I think.
That's okay. Yeah. I think we've got some really wonderful advice. And John will be joining us for a panel discussion after our next two speakers as well. So thank you very much, John Wenborn, Senior Account Director at LinkedIn. Thank you for joining us this evening. We're going to take a 1-minute brief pause, and we'll be back here very shortly with our next speaker. Hello and welcome back. I'm now lucky to be joined by Blair Slater, our Head of Academic Career Success here at the University of New South Wales. Blair, welcome.
Thank you, Chris. Good to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you here. It's a busy role that you have, helping students to prepare for their futures. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I love it. I thrive on it. I thrive seeing the transformation of students, both undergraduate students and postgraduate students. I find the individual stories that every student has to be inspiring. I've worked in higher education in the careers and employability space for the last 10 years. And being able to now connect students, no matter what stage of life they are in, to employability opportunities is really exciting to see. I also like it because I learn so much about emerging trends in different industries. So it allows me to sort of stay on top of what employers are looking for, what industries are growing, and I've watched the global economy and the Australian economy in the last year with some fascination in regards to that.
Because it possibly surprises students that there's such a rigorous approach to career development. It's not an accident that our students go out and get employed. There's quite a rigor to it.
Certainly not. And I think the fact of the world-class leading academics here, Tracy being one of them who will speak after me, I know. I think students are exposed to so many different opportunities. We want students to reflect on themselves. So many students say, well, I'm interested in engineering or I'm interested in commerce. Well, why is that? And the team of career coaches that we have here, through a lot of one-on-one appointments with students, will ask them to dive deeper into that. Because going back on what John was saying, it's then that you can start to articulate your difference. You can think about, well, what is my passion, and how does that passion make me stand out in the job market, and how does it make me unique from other competitors?
It's a really interesting point that you raise, that idea of what a student brings to the table. And if you haven't had a chance to watch our discussion with John from LinkedIn, I strongly encourage you to go and do that. But I think it's a really important factor. It's not a one-way relationship, much like a student in LinkedIn is not a one-way transactional relationship. this idea of employability is not a one-way thing because, as you said there, it's about what the student brings to the table as well. So,
absolutely, and I think that's why we have seen an increase in an interest in the postgraduate degrees, because students with that type of experience are typically bringing a wealth of experience to UNSW and to their degree, and they're utilizing their background and their knowledge to then contribute to the class, to contribute to those discussions. One of the biggest things employers look for these days is emotional intelligence. And so coming back into the degree and being self-aware of what they're learning, what they're able to contribute, and building on the foundation of skills and experience they already have to recharge their career, if you will, that to me demonstrates an immense amount of emotional intelligence. And what we see, and I believe what makes UNSW graduates so successful, is the community of all of those people doing that at the same time.
And it's a really interesting point, isn't it? Because to actually pursue that postgraduate study shows a level of intent, and it shows a level of awareness that you want to build an additional set of skills. And you know, John previously described it as the foot in the door, if you like, the ticket to ride. But actually, it probably it shows a layer of commitment.
Yeah, absolutely. When the top graduate recruiters were surveyed last year, and it's a survey that we look at very closely, and it asks them, what are you looking for in graduates, but also, do you find graduates lacking? And one of the ones that has recently crept up more and more into the top 10 is initiative. And I think undertaking a postgraduate study is such unequivocal evidence of taking that initiative. You're not only aware of the industry changes and the dynamics that are happening around you, but you're also well aware of your own self and your own career, and you're taking that initiative to pursue further study and enhance or recharge a particular aspect of your career.
And I think that's such a fascinating aspect of that conversation, isn't it? It's you know, being able to articulate what you have got out of postgraduate study to employers, because employers are telling us they want all of these things. They want the emotional intelligence, they want the commitment, they want the resilience. But students need to be able to articulate it, because the degree's probably giving it to them, but sometimes actually recognizing that and articulating it is a little bit harder. And I guess that's where yourself and your colleagues come into it.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. We often refer to it as the articulation gap. And quite often we see students that are very well qualified and they have the skills that employers are looking for, but the other candidate might also be listing those same skills. And it's how do they then differentiate their communication skills from candidate B's communication skills. And it really comes down to their experience and how they are able to talk about that. The career coaches, that's what we consistently do. We do mock interviews and we do coaching sessions, and we'll really try to extrapolate how a student or how a candidate is going to talk about their experience and skills. When we speak to employers as well, they want a variety of examples. And posting on LinkedIn different experiences that you've had that illustrate those skills, that's a great way of establishing your brand. But then when it comes down to the interview, you want to be able to have solid, justifiable evidence of experiences that you've had that can describe those skills.
It's really interesting, and we're almost going as far as building a construct tonight. You've got to have the degree on your LinkedIn profile.
Absolutely.
You have to be able to then articulate in your LinkedIn profile what that means to you personally and the skills and bits and pieces that's helped you to develop on your own personal journey. And then when you go into the interview, you've got to be able to take that a step further. You've got to be able to really demonstrate it in the most practical of senses.
Definitely. And as someone who used to interview candidates a lot, I do find one of the most common mistakes, unfortunately, that candidates make is they do undersell themselves. They assume that, especially in maybe a postgraduate market, that they have that very reputable degree from UNSW, and that's absolutely what gets you in the door, for an interview. But then when you're competing against those other candidates, it's the quality of the examples and the way you're able to describe those that really start to separate a candidate and stand out in an interview. So I think going in, assume the interviewer knows nothing about you, even though they've read your LinkedIn profile, their cover letter, their resume. They have other things going on. So seize upon that opportunity to really demonstrate why you are the best fit. I've always said that interviews aren't necessarily a test or an exam. They're really an opportunity for the candidate to simply prove why they are the best fit for the position, and they've already demonstrated that to a degree because that's why they're there for the interview.
And it's a really interesting point you make about getting to that point. And I guess that's the value of coaching and career coaching, as you sort of articulated there. And that's a service that's available to all of our students at UNSW, which I'll give that a quick plug, which is not what we're here to do, but I think it's an important point to make. And how many students take you up on it?
Yeah, not enough.
Yeah.
It's worthwhile mentioning, and I will say that, anecdotally, and I do have the stats, can't quote them now, but we do see a lot more undergraduate students take advantage of those appointments because they're still trying to navigate their career and find out the world of work. Where we don't see the uptake as high is with our postgraduate students, because unfortunately I believe there may be a misconception that those types of appointments are more for an elementary, really starting your career journey. I'll admit I enjoy the postgraduate conversations probably a little bit more because there's a story. And it really comes down to us. How do you unpack that story? How do you articulate that story to be marketable to an employer?
And, without being too precise, how many students are able to articulate exactly why they've come to do some postgraduate study?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the ones who've had some good thought about their own career and where they would like to take it and are well aware of their industry as well. I think there's great alignment there where they're saying, I'm recognizing this shift or I'm recognizing this change. Or I've seen other colleagues, I've heard this a lot, they'll see other colleagues that are 5-10 years ahead of them who might have a postgraduate qualification and they're seeing them advance in their career. So they recognize that need for it. So I would say a good portion are able to describe it quite well.
Or now, as I've learned tonight, the person whose career I aspire to have has this qualification, and I better go and get one myself.
Absolutely. So many people think LinkedIn, just to go back on LinkedIn, because I know it's sort of a topic of conversation this evening, a lot of people think it's all about forward branding and promoting yourself, and absolutely that's a big component. But what I encourage students, and I do this myself, is it's an excellent research platform. Students often say, well, what can I do with this degree? Or what type of industry could I enter? Well, look at other graduates from UNSW through the alumni page, right? It's not a plug, but I look at it because I sometimes get ideas from it to tell students. But you can see what alumni with that degree are doing now and where they have been. So there's this magical list of employers that have hired students from that discipline before, and there's no other more powerful tool that I can think of that can give you an idea of potential career trajectories.
Yeah, it's such a fascinating jumping in point. Yes. And I think the career trajectory now in this sort of interesting time in history in which we're at, it's interesting, isn't it? Because we're seeing all of these new trends where the acceleration of automation, the rise of the knowledge economy and employers wanting creativity and all of these different things that the media is covering quite effectively. Students need to outpace that now.
Yes. It's an old adage, but I really do believe that the current rate of acceleration of industry trends, the rate at which things are changing, is the fastest that any of us have ever seen. You look at the rise of fintech, for example, or artificial intelligence. You think of all the different companies, Uber, that didn't exist.
I should
10
say
years ago.
that's 2 panelists out of 3 that have used artificial intelligence in a sentence now. So we're going well.
1 point, yeah, okay. But the pace at which those changes are happening are immense. And I think what the pandemic did was just accentuate those that much more. It made people really aware of how quickly things can change and how you do need to stay on top of those trends and potentially recharge. And I think a postgraduate study or any type of study keeps you on the forefront. And a lot of employers, sometimes I hear this from students, they say, well, why would an employer want someone fresh out of a postgraduate or an undergraduate university? And I would say, because you are at the cutting edge of knowledge. Yep. And the professors here are, absolutely at the peak of their research and are able to disseminate that knowledge to students, and then students are able to take that into the workforce. So that's a great way of staying a bit ahead of that industry trend.
It's such a good point, and it's something I'm going to explore with our next speaker actually as well, is how we keep that, how we stay right on the cutting edge of that trend, because it's so important. And now when we've seen people displaced in their workplaces, we've seen people looking to reskill, recharge, upskill, all of these words around skill. You come to university to have an education, and that brings with it a set of skills, if you like. What are those top skills that employers are telling you right now? You touched on a few earlier. I'm keen to hear the rest.
Sure, I feel like I have them plugged on my wall, which I often do. Really, the first couple ones should be no surprises, but there's communication and interpersonal skills. Then there's teamwork.
Yep.
Then
And I'm still claiming that the robots can't do this.
No, they cannot. Absolutely not. Then there's resilience and initiative. And then what we've also seen very recently, it's always been floating in the top 10, but it's now in the top 6, emotional intelligence. Now, the interesting thing, communication and interpersonal skills, you can define those in so many different ways. No matter what discipline you're in, no matter what industry, the communication and interpersonal skills will be pivotal to advance your career. And I feel, interacting with other like-minded individuals is a great way of doing that. The adaptability, the emotional intelligence, the resilience, and the initiative, I think people are going to start highlighting a lot more, because the past year has enabled people to do things, whatever those may be, could be postgraduate study, to exemplify that. And more employers, I think, are going to be asking, tell us about a time you've demonstrated resilience. Tell us about a time you've demonstrated adaptability. Because they know, let alone in that job or the industry, you will need to adapt. So to have an example of how you've done that in the last year or in current times, I think is going to be really helpful for any candidate.
It is interesting, although I do worry that the answer to the resilience question is just going to be 2020. People will
I
just
survived
say
2020.
2020. But it's a really great point that you make about this idea of teamwork and learning together with the best and brightest minds. And I think that's something that sometimes people forget in a university context, is often when you think about your role at work and you think about the times that you've loved at work in your own professional life, if you like, often the most exciting times are when you're working with people who just get it and who really can work at your level. And that's postgraduate study, if you like, is a matching of those things in the classroom together.
Without a doubt. And you think of the wealth of experience that various postgraduate students are going to bring. Everyone's going to bring their own individual insight, their experience, their history, their opinions, and that, as we all know, is the working world in itself, right? It's an encapsulation of the working world here at UNSW. And it is competitive. It's a hard university to get into. I appreciate that. But what that assures candidates of is the quality, like you said, of the other students.
It's, a point very well made. And Blair, we're out of time, and I think we could discuss this all night. And Blair will be back on our panel to discuss a few more of those things that he knows that employers are looking for. So if you've got any specific questions, please throw them in via the chat box there, and we will answer them. We'll be back with Blair shortly, but I did promise everybody that I would ask your top tips. So Blair, if you had to quickly summarize your top tips.
Sure. Well, I would say they're probably 3. I think it's to be aware of those top 5 skills and how you would be able to describe or articulate them pertaining to your own examples. Utilize UNSW employability. It's here. There's lots of people that exist to help enhance your employability and use that to succeed. So take advantage of that. You need to be proactive to utilize that. The other one would be to not lose sight of your network. I'm a huge fan of the hidden job market. It's how I've obtained pretty much every position in my career, through networking. When studying, either undergraduate or postgraduate, don't lose touch with your network. In my opinion, you have the ultimate reason to actually broadcast and stay in touch with your network, because you're learning new things, you're doing new things, and what better update to share than I'm now doing a postgraduate degree and this is what I'm learning. It's really important to stay in touch with your network, so when you do graduate, you can merge into the job market quite easily.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Thank you very much for joining us, Blair. We'll see you back on our panel very shortly. We'll take another quick 1-minute pause, and I'll be joined by Associate Professor Tracy Wilcox. Hello and welcome back to the third of our discussions this evening. Next, I'm joined by Associate Professor Tracy Wilcox, our Academic Program Director of Postgraduate Studies in the UNSW Business School. Welcome, Tracy. Thank you for joining me this evening. Tell us a little bit about yourself to start.
Well, sure, Chris. It's great to be here. I actually started out in life as a chemist. My undergraduate degree is in science, but I came to UNSW and did a postgrad business degree and loved it so much, I signed up for good.
And you never left.
And I haven't left. And so I've really had a really interesting career that definitely wasn't linear, and I have, I think, one of the best jobs in the world now because I get to meet students from all over the world and they're all looking to reshape their career by doing postgraduate studies, so I love that part of my work.
It's a fascinating jump in. Did you know exactly the direction you wanted to go when you chose to reshape, or were there different options available to you?
Look, I think for me, I really enjoyed the people side of my role, and so I decided that I really wanted to learn more about how to be a better people manager and how to be a better change manager, and so I applied for and was accepted into the Master of Commerce.
Right, and I think it's really interesting that there doesn't have to necessarily be a very, very clear direction. You've acknowledged something in yourself that you loved and that you wanted to pursue. And I think that the postgraduate study supports that now. It's not just one, you've got to come in and do a master's and then your thesis and your PhD and your dissertation, all of that. There's a lot of flexibility in postgraduate study.
And I think there has to be because, as Blair has mentioned and John's mentioned, things are changing so quickly. And, if this post-pandemic world is going to teach us anything, it's that we can't necessarily predict what's going to be needed in 5 or 10 years in the future. So I think that's what makes postgraduate study really exciting, is that, you can chart your own path depending on what your interest is.
And it's not the full commitment to the master's, is it? It's, there's graduate certificates, diplomas.
That's right.
There's broad, there's specific.
That's right. I mean, there's different ways that you can study as a postgraduate student. So if you really want to specialise in depth, you can do an in-depth master's. So for example, if you really are interested in financial technology, you can do a master's of fintech with us. If you're really interested in analytics or finance, you can really focus on those areas. But if you want a broader base, we also have programs like our Master of Commerce. And then for those short kind of upskilling pathways, then we have graduate certificates where you can be totally flexible in what you choose.
And I think it's a really interesting point when we start to talk about what we try to deliver in those programs, because our audience tonight will be thinking about short courses and graduate certificates and masters and probably going, oh, look, I just don't know how to choose. And I guess you can do the 2-week sort of skill-based training, or you can go, I guess, a little bit deeper, even with a graduate certificate.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we offer as a university running postgraduate degree programs is that it's not just about trying to pick the next skill or the next platform. It's about learning how to think. It's about engaging with ideas that are really shaping the field. And we have academic staff, as Blair mentioned, who are the leaders, international leaders in their field, who are really across the current thinking and debates. So it makes you more future focused, I think, rather than trying to play catch up with the next skill or the next platform.
It's a really nice thought and actually not helpful to this audience, but John and I were having a fascinating discussion before we started tonight about some of these big innovations in tech and the world there. And it's not something that people would have done a short course in designing the next iPhone.
No.
They're creative thinkers with an incredible depth of knowledge in their field.
That's right. And I think creativity, I know Blair touched on that, but that's absolutely important. And for us, creativity means learning to think outside the box. So that applies to any field. It's not just the creative industries. It's about looking at a problem or an issue and bringing your knowledge in a completely unique way to actually resolve it in ways that maybe no one else has thought about doing.
Yeah, and I think there's a fascinating thought there. Even using your own example as a chemist who then went into commerce, those scientific skills, you must have still applied them to work you were doing in your masters.
Absolutely, absolutely. I don't think any skill or any learning that you have is ever going to be wasted. You know, there's always a way to draw on it. And for me, it was drawing on an understanding of how data works and the scientific method, which I think is really, you know, even more important nowadays as well.
Absolutely, because I think people worry that if they were to career switch and go back and do a postgraduate study, they're throwing everything away. But it's just not the case.
And it's never the case. And I think what I love about our postgrad students is they come from such a diverse range of fields. So you might have somebody that studied international relations or linguistics in the classroom with somebody who studied engineering or science, or somebody who studied accounting. And that diversity of perspectives really makes the classroom, you know, a fantastic place to be in.
And I think Blair and I were having that discussion about those, you know, the best and brightest minds coming together to look at some of these problems. And I was going to ask you actually, what does a typical postgraduate student look like that's coming into the classroom? But I suspect you're going to tell me there's no such thing.
There is no such thing. But I guess one thing that strikes me about most of them is that they're interested in developing themselves, and they're interested, you know, in learning something new and staying on top of what's really emerging. And I think that kind of love of learning and that idea that they're lifelong learners is really important, and I think that's what we need in the future.
It's such a through line of the conversations we've been having tonight is that intent of study and that self-reflection and that authenticity that students can reflect on and actually understand why they would come into a program, as opposed to going, my boss thinks I need a master's to get a promotion. Yeah. It's actually the question you need to be asking yourself is, what am I going to gain as a human being out of this? And that's actually what employers are looking for.
Absolutely. And how can I learn to think differently? Because I think, you know, when you come to university, you do learn to think differently, and you learn those critical thinking skills. And really that applies to any postgraduate program, asking the right questions and looking at the big picture and thinking about, you know, where does this information come from? Where am I learning this? I think that applies to any postgraduate program.
And I wanted to talk to you a little bit further. We've spoken a little bit about some of these top level skills, you know, the communication, the resilience, the adaptability, all of those sort of skills. But I guess then as an academic director, you're having to think about the deep disciplinary knowledge as well, and balancing that with everything else. So what does that add to the equation?
Well, look, I think the deep disciplinary knowledge allows those of us, depending on our discipline, to look at a problem in a way where you really have the skills and the understanding to solve a problem, and I guess to predict what might happen in the future and understand a situation better. So whether they're deep skills in business analytics, or whether they're deep skills in using technology, whether they're deep skills in people management, each of those skill sets allows you to bring something to your employer that will help the employer better face challenges, whatever challenges they're coming up against. And
I guess then the people who are guiding students through that journey is a really interesting point to make as well, because you know, there's the horrible saying, and I'm from a family of teachers, so I'm allowed to say it, but you know, those who can't do teach, which is not fair, is it? Because we've got people who are at the absolute forefront of what they're doing.
Yeah, I think that saying was kind of got lost in the 1970s somewhere.
I know, and I brought it back. I'm sorry.
But yeah, look, I think what we have in at UNSW is that we have experts in their field who are shaping the debate around the world, internationally and globally, who will share that with you. And we also have in the business school, for example, professors of practice who come in from industry. So we have that way of combining theoretical insights and knowledge and knowledge depth with how to solve practical problems that are happening out in the world. And I think that's a really nice combination.
Yeah, and I think I'd like to, you know, just dig into that role of the academic just a little bit more, because I think it's poorly understood. I think, you know, students who are joining us don't necessarily understand that those who are teaching in these classrooms are, you know, part of the time they're researching and they're contributing to the development of knowledge in these fields.
Yeah, we're not just teachers, we're researchers, and we also engage and lead in our professional fields or with industry. So we're out in the world making a difference in however way we can.
And I think one of the things, we're all clutching for silver linings from the pandemic, but I think one of the things we've really seen Australia embrace is the role of researchers in the public discourse.
Yeah.
And it's such a great illustration of, we've seen lots of our UNSW colleagues in the media who a year ago were teaching first year classes,
That's
which is
right.
just, it's such a beautiful representation of what the role of a researcher / academic / teacher / educator can actually be at a university.
Yeah, I mean, if we didn't have experts, if we didn't have researchers, we wouldn't have a COVID vaccine. We wouldn't have public health professionals guiding our political leaders on what to do. So I think it's a really nice example.
It certainly is. I guess the other example and the thing that strikes me from the earlier conversation with Blair was this thought that employers are ready to hire our graduates straight out of the classroom.
Yeah.
And there must be a reason for that in the way that the courses are designed and structured.
Look, I think that's true, Chris, because the way we look at our degree programs, we have the in-class experience and we have the student experience more holistically, which is all of the things outside the classroom. And Blair was talking about some of the opportunities that our career people offer students. But, I would encourage students to make the most of their education by looking at their holistic student experience, because that's what's going to make them as employable as possible, is having that in-depth knowledge, understanding the evolution of their field, but also developing the kinds of skills that Blair and John were talking about as well. So I think it's both things.
Absolutely. And I'm really interested in your thought before. You mentioned the professors of practice who are joining us at UNSW from industry, which is quite unique. How does that work? What does that bring to the classroom?
Oh, well, it's great. They actually come and they give guest lectures, so they might actually host a class and students can ask them questions about the industries that they come from. They also play a really important role in helping us design curriculum, so that the kinds of things that we're teaching reflect the real industry needs and the kinds of issues that industries are dealing with.
And I think it's such an important point to make, is that curriculum renewal, because I think there'd be a stereotype out there that we just go out and update the course reader and roll it out again, but it's a rigorous process.
It is. We apply a lot of strategic thinking to our curriculum design, and that informs what's happening in the world outside, really informs the way that we look at curriculum.
And I guess that what's happening in the world outside is that our graduates are pretty adaptable. They're not, students graduating from the business school and not just being sought in the traditional sort of commerce, finance, accounting sort of fields anymore. You must see your graduates go everywhere.
Oh, they do. I mean, we've had some of our graduates go and start up social enterprises that are making a huge difference. I was speaking to one of our graduates last week who set up a social enterprise in Malawi that brings community development and sustainable farming and preschools to this community. I mean, that's not someone that you'd expect to be a typical business graduate,
No, and it's such an interesting point. We often hear it from our postgraduate students that they might feel frustrated in their current career that they can't have the impact that perhaps they want to. Like, their current role doesn't match their ambition, but it doesn't match their ambition to make a social impact. And I think that's something that we've taken to heart here at UNSW. It's a focus.
It is. I mean, we think of ourselves as being not just looking after the mind and the hand, but also the heart. So looking at purpose, and I think that's a question for all of our students and prospective students to ask themselves is, what do I see as my purpose? What kind of a difference do I want to make in whatever way that is? And how can my study and my learning and my lifelong learning help to contribute to my purpose?
Absolutely, and I think we heard that from John. You need to be authentic in what you're portraying online, and Blair sort of reinforced that with people need to understand what they bring to the table in the employment relationship, and you're saying as well that people to understand their purpose. So really what we're encouraging our audience to think about is what are you trying to achieve, and then what are you going to get out of the degree that we're going to offer you, I think, if we had to summarise it neatly at the end there.
And I mean, I like to tell all of my students that it doesn't matter where you end up. We want to give you the confidence and the skills to make a difference in your world, whatever that world is. Whether it's a fintech startup, whether it's in a big accounting firm, whether it's in supply chain work. It doesn't really matter. But think about how you now can make a difference in that world. In whatever way you can.
I think we have to stop there because I think you've summed it up so almost magically at the end there with a bow on top, Tracy. Thank you very much. We're going to take a very brief pause now and we'll be joined by all of our panellists. So John and Blair will be joining Tracy and I on stage, and we're going to take questions that you've submitted throughout the evening and any other questions that you'd like to throw to us. So we'll be back in a minute. Please have your questions ready. Start submitting them now and we'll look forward to discussing them shortly. Hello, we are back and live, and I'm very excited to be joined by all of our panellists this evening. John, Blair, Tracy, thank you very much for your insights. Firstly, I've got to say, I've loved the discussion. I've had such a wonderful last hour just listening to all of your bits and pieces, and I can certainly see with all of the questions that are coming in via LinkedIn that you out there have been enjoying those as well. So thank you for joining us, and thank you for submitting your questions. We're going to work through them with the panel and have a bit of a discussion. We won't go too rapid fire because certainly with the amount of questions that have been submitted, if we try to answer everything, we will be here all night. But we will get back to you in the comments there as well. And if you've got any further questions for UNSW that come up in the future, you can always jump onto our LinkedIn page and connect with us. So let's start off, I guess, sequentially. We've got a question from Craig about LinkedIn, and I'll start with John, but I'm interested to hear from our other panelists as well. And I guess, John, this is the future. Does the CV get completely usurped and replaced by the LinkedIn profile? Thank you, Craig, for that question.
It is a little bit my opinion here because, as we were saying before with some of the panelists, things change so quickly. But in my opinion, there's no way it's going to be replaced. They're two very different things. One is what you've actually done and what your credentials are and you know, your degrees. The other one's really about taking you to, it supports your CV, but then what it does is it brings more to the table. So people can get more of an understanding who you are.
It rounds you out as a person, doesn't it?
That's exactly right.
It's far more sophisticated than the photo on the CV, which can sometimes look a little clunky when printed in black and white, like I tend to do.
I always say the CV gets you in the door, LinkedIn puts you at the top of the list, and it's your interview that actually gets you further. Yeah. Right? So it's just it just helps you along. It supports what your CV has.
And Tracy, I guess a lot of academics and graduates from postgraduate qualifications are really tapping into the power of the social network and LinkedIn and that sort of environment as well. What are you seeing in that space?
I love to look at LinkedIn because it's a way that I can keep in touch with our ex-students and trace their career journey, which it's always really lovely to see the kinds of things that they're doing. But I think just to add to what John was saying, what I also like about LinkedIn is that what people curate in terms of what they're posting up, what they're sharing, gives you some insights into the way they think and the kinds of things that they value. And I think that you'll never get that out of a CV.
And I think that value proposition is such an interesting point. And Blair, I think you would know from talking to employers that value match is so important.
Absolutely. And I think LinkedIn is an area where you can really start to express your interest and your passion, and I think that helps differentiate you from other candidates as well. It can show a bit of a history. You can be more descriptive in that. Going back to your point about LinkedIn and resume, I would agree with John in that they have two different functionalities. The beauty, I would say, of LinkedIn is it's working for you 24/7. It's always there, it's always live, and the algorithms are always working to match you with relevant information or potential job opportunities. The resume is something that you really tailor when you find that opportunity, and it helps with that interview.
And I'll go with another LinkedIn question while we're here, and this question comes from Wilson, and it's, John, if I start with you, we touched on it briefly, but where's the line? So Wilson asks, should LinkedIn be only for work-related content? Or is there a bit of space for personal interest? And you gave the example of dressing for LinkedIn.
Yeah. So the line, there is a line, but the line would be around your personal interest, would be something that you are volunteering for. So for example, I volunteer for lifesaving. I've got that on there. That's a bit about me and it's my personal self, but it's also giving them an idea of something that I'm interested in, something I'm passionate about. Where the line is I don't talk about my golf game with my friends on the weekend. And there's another platform for that, and I love using that platform for that, but that's where I see the line. If it's going to enhance who you are and give a bit of a better idea of who you are with a few personal touches, that's great, but be very careful not to fall into, because then people won't want to follow you or connect with you anymore because they don't want to they're not on LinkedIn to hear about, I think I use the example as a COVID dog. We all got COVID dogs. But they don't really want to hear what you did on the weekend. They want to hear who you are more so. Yeah.
Yep. It's such an important point. I'll take the next question here from Isabella, who has actually already started with us at UNSW. She's just started a Masters of Design. And Blair, I'll go to you with this question. Isabella's sort of asking about mentoring, and I guess that connects to coaching. And she's wondering, is mentoring useful, relevant? Where do I start? Can you tell us a little bit about mentoring and why that's important?
Absolutely. I think mentoring or just connecting with people within your industry is of critical importance. And it's something that I don't think many students do enough of. When I think of mentoring, there are various mentoring programs depending on the faculty that you're in at UNSW. But the other way that I would encourage students to take advantage of the concept of mentoring is through information interviews. Information interviews, I think, is the most valuable career development tool out there, and it's where you would approach someone, often someone that you might find through doing a search on LinkedIn, and asking to speak to them about their career, their job, how they got to where they are in their industry. And it's a great way of being able to ascertain sort of firsthand knowledge to then feed back into your degree and the choices that you're making. And it doesn't necessarily need to be a long-standing mentoring relationship. I encourage students to do several information interviews throughout their term or throughout the calendar year. And it's through those conversations that they can gain insight into industry trends, what Isabella might be able to do with her design degree. And where a careers coach would come into play is how to shape that conversation and how to shape those questions to be able to get the best responses, but also how to approach that person for an information interview.
Okay. And do keep your questions coming in. We're getting lots of them through now, so we'll get to as many as we possibly can. Tracy, I might bring the next question to you. It's from Abdullah, who's talking about online study. And I know you've done quite a lot of work in designing for online, and it's not as simple as people may have thought, which would be the old archetype of put a lecturer in front of a camera and hope for the best. Online study is a little bit more sophisticated now in the methodology. Can you tell us a little bit about what we've been up to
Yeah,
there?
no, it sure is. And I'm lucky. I've been teaching online for 10, 15 years now, so a long time. And there's an art to it and a science to it. And we have some fantastic online educational developing staff. So people who have expertise in how to put together your learning experience online so it is as positive as possible. And so we're looking for things like getting students to interact with each other, to reflect on what they're learning, to engage with the content in really active ways. And that really involves thinking things through.
And I guess the second part of that question that we've had a little bit of tonight is what is the situation for 2021? It's been a challenging time for everybody in 2020, and we've done our best to adapt, but certainly in terms of teaching online and hybrid sort of classes in 2021, we've got a bit of a plan in place.
Yeah, and so the university's plan is that we will focus as much as we can on the lecturing side of things being online, but we have a mixture of experiences for the smaller classes as well. So it really depends on what it is that you're studying, but all of the universities have COVID-safe plans, and we're able to respond to things as they emerge. And I think really 2021 is going to be, let's get that vaccine out so that we can have more confidence in what we're doing.
And certainly, Blair and I spoke about the rate of acceleration in technology and the way that has been working. Certainly, our online learning capabilities accelerated rapidly in 2020. So you were ahead of the curve in
Yes.
many respects.
And look, and I spent a lot of last year helping other teaching staff and coaching them and helping them to develop skills. And, we've been able to bring in some really fantastic online developers, educational developers who are really working side by side with our expert academic staff to try and design the most effective online learning experience.
And I think in terms of the experiences that students should expect from UNSW, there's some really great questions in here about how to take advantage of some of the things, Blair, that in particular you've been talking about, the services here at UNSW that allow students to really, take advantage of employability and our reputation in employability. So thank you, Borong, for that question. How?
Yes.
Just tell us how, Blair.
Well, we quickly moved online as well in the employability space because all of our employer partners did the same. And the employers that would regularly be on campus for in-person networking events and career expos, guest lectures, all of a sudden that became remote. I actually enjoyed it because it allowed us to engage more of our international employers who used to say, well, sorry, Blair, we're unable to have the budget to fly down there, or the time zone was different. So they've been able to come online. All of our careers expos have been converted online. Obviously, we hope to have those come back in person, but we ran a very successful mid-year expo last year through VFairs platform, and our upcoming annual March Expo is going to be run through the same platform. And what's interesting about that is students and employers are now used to that medium. I encountered a little bit of trepidation from both students and employers when we first started to do those online events, but the expos have been fully online where students can interact with employers in live video chat or live text chat. They can upload documents, they can download documents from the employers as well, and employers are enjoying it because they're able to access students' resumes, LinkedIn portfors or profiles as well. The other area that we've done converted, Chris, online is our Industry Insights, Industry Connections series. And the Industry Connections are events where we invite students from all disciplines, undergraduate and postgraduate, to join in online, network online, but also listen to a panel of industry experts from different industries and different organizations talk about a topic of relevance. So my favorite earlier, artificial intelligence, I'll mention it again, but it was, how is artificial intelligence impacting your industry? And we had 4 or 5 different industry representatives from across a range of disciplines, so no matter what degree you're studying, you're able to attend that event. We've seen online attendance for that type of platform and event skyrocket.
So yeah, I mean, I've recently learned that artificial intelligence is not just people pretending to be intelligent in my industry. It runs a little bit deeper than
Yes,
that. So
it does.
we're all learning as part of the sort of pace of growth. And I guess we've seen a real internationalization of both study, both of career. You know, John, if it comes to, have you been seeing much of that? Employers aren't just looking in their own backyard anymore. We're hearing that tech in particular is an industry now where they feel they can get talent from wherever.
Well, until last year, but yes, absolutely. So the way, especially here in Australia, that they don't have enough people to fill these jobs at the moment, so they are going overseas for a lot of them. And it's changing so quickly that sometimes with LinkedIn, we can see a fastest growing skill happening in California, for example, but it hasn't happened in Australia yet. We know that's coming, and all of a sudden it'll hit us, and then so they go, well, they're all in California right now. And obviously that changes quickly because people see that they need that skill and it goes around the world. But we are seeing a lot of that going overseas for a lot of those. I mean, the fastest growing skills we've seen on our lists, and this is through LinkedIn's taxonomy, changes in weeks. So the fastest growing skills sometimes, they're all pretty much technology based at this stage. But we see those fastest growing skills changing in 3 or 4 weeks, and all of a sudden it's just these new ones come that we didn't. The best example I've got is, a marketing manager 4 years ago would have finished a degree in marketing managing. Well, now they need social media marketing, for example. No one saw that coming. You know what I mean? It just came, and that's an obvious one, but there's, in the tech world, there's ones that you haven't even heard of. Machine learning is one of the biggest ones.
And I think that's really interesting implications for us as a university. And Tracy, you've just been involved in launching a new financial technology program. How did you make sure that was ahead of the curve?
Oh, that was a really exciting program to be involved in because we have industry experts, people who have their own fintech startups who are involved in the curriculum development and the teaching of that program. And that's an online program. So we have people everywhere that are involved in it. So that program was something that we're really proud of. Our School of Banking and Finance in the business school have connections outside the university, across industry, that gives them those cutting edge technological skills.
It's such an interesting point of it. We become very future focused very quickly, and I guess that's one of the things that I've certainly taken from this evening is that it's not good enough thinking about my current skill set. I really need to be thinking about the skill set that I'm going to need in 4 or 5 years' time, really, realistically. So I guess if I had to finish, and we're rapidly running out of time, so thank you very much for joining us. But before we do wrap up, I'd be interested if you had to land one tip now. We started off pushing you all to give 5 tips. If you now had to narrow down and just give one tip to our audience that you've had the time to reflect over the course of conversations this evening, and John, I guess you were first off the rank. So if I start with you, what's your lasting tip from tonight?
I mean, to narrow it down to one is difficult.
It is.
But if I had to say one, which is the easiest, just complete your whole LinkedIn profile. There's boxes that come up and ask you to complete it. And then after that, really put your personality in there. Show who you really are so that when people are looking for you, they find you for who you are and what you studied.
Yep.
And I think what that brings is a happy employer with a very happy employee.
Yep. Okay. Blair.
Sure. Well, I will say to stay on top of industry trends and knowledge. And there's many different ways in which you can do that. And if you're unsure how, see a careers coach. But I think it's very important to stay up to date with what is happening in the world, in the industry, in the potential profession that you wish to pursue. Things are changing so rapidly, and there's many tools to be able to do that. We touched on LinkedIn and information interviews. I think it's really important, and it's informed by the fact that most employers say the number one thing that candidates are lacking is a lack of full understanding of commercial awareness or industry trends. And if a candidate can demonstrate that they're staying on top of that, I think that really elevates them in any application.
Okay, great. Tracy?
I think it's to be active in your learning, in your lifelong learning. Don't just be passive and wait for the knowledge to come to you, but just to actively pursue knowledge, to pursue different mindsets, to pursue different perspectives. I think that's really important to be future focused.
I think it's a wonderful tip, and certainly the one that I've taken away from this evening is this idea of authenticity. You've all spoken about being authentic, but doing it with an intent. So understanding what I can bring as an individual to either my LinkedIn profile, my work with a career coach, or my postgraduate study. If I understand what I'm looking to get and I understand what I'm bringing to the table, then I stand much more chance of being able to communicate that in an authentic way off the back. So I hope that everybody who's joined us tonight has walked away and at least one of those tips has resonated with you and helps you in some way this year in 2021. I'd like to thank my expert panel for joining me this evening. John, Blair, Tracy, thank you very much for giving up some time and helping our audience out there in LinkedIn land to explore some of these ideas. It's been a pleasure to have you with us here at the University of New South Wales. If you do have any further questions for us about any of our postgraduate study, or you're looking to explore some of those opportunities for yourself this year, do jump onto our page and follow the links to make an inquiry, and we'll be happy to connect with you and have a chat about what options might be available to you. Apart from that, please have a safe and wonderful 2021, and we hope that we get to connect with you here at the university or on our LinkedIn profile in the very near future. Thank you very much.
You're the person the world needs. Life is changing, and the future is uncertain. You may not know how or why yet, but you know you're here to make a difference. You're not waiting for the universe to give you the answers. You're finding them for yourself. Challenging echoes with evidence. Few people have great ideas. Even fewer make them happen. It takes a dreamer, an explorer, a researcher, a leader, a thinker. It takes someone like